My earliest memories involve my father checking his Rolex while half listening to my school stories, and my mother correcting my posture at dinner parties. Shoulders back, Caden. People are watching. By age 7, I understood that family love came with conditions. Then there was Grandpa Walter. My weekend visits to his lakeside cabin became my salvation. Where my parents saw a modest home as something embarrassing, I discovered genuine connection. My parents, who I had not seen since they abandoned me 15 years ago, walked in with confident smiles. They said the words that made my blood run cold. "We are his guardians." But when my lawyer came in with his folder, their faces turned pale. Before I tell you how I finally stood up to the people who threw me away, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever had to protect what is rightfully yours. Life with my parents started normally enough. I sat in the leather chair of the law office, my hands trembling, as I heard the numbers. $2 million, the estate in Boston. All of it mine. I should have felt elated, but all I could think about was how empty that massive house would feel without Aunt Meredith in it. The room, filled with distant relatives, stared at me with a mixture of shock and barely concealed resentment. Then the door opened. Mom would stare at the door, a glass of something amber in her hand that I was not allowed to touch. I overheard arguments about money, about bets, about loans from people with names that made my mother cry. I tried being extra good, thinking somehow my perfect grades might fix whatever was breaking in our family. By the time I was 10, our apartment had become a battlefield. Dad lost his job after his boss caught him taking money from the register. He swore it was just a loan, that he would have put it back after one sure thing paid off. Mom started drinking earlier in the day, sometimes forgetting to pick me up from school. I learned to walk home alone, to make my own sandwiches, to become invisible when they fought. I was 13 when it happened, a Tuesday in October. I remember because I had a science project due that Friday about the solar system. I went to bed, listening to them fighting about something called a second mortgage. When I woke up, the apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I called out for them, but got no answer. The living room was nearly empty. The television gone. Mom's collection of glass birds vanished. Dad's recliner missing. On the kitchen counter was a note in Mom's handwriting. "We cannot do this anymore. There is a little food in the fridge. Call Mrs. Peterson next door when you read this. No, sorry. No, love you." No explanation of when they would return. They had taken everything of value, including the $63 I had saved in a shoebox for a new bike. Mrs. Peterson called social services. I spent 3 weeks in a temporary foster home, while the state tried to locate any relatives willing to take me. That is when they found my Aunt Meredith, my father's older sister, who he had not spoken to in years, a woman I had never met who apparently lived in a mansion in Boston. The social worker explained that Aunt Meredith had agreed to take me in. I packed my few remaining possessions in a donated duffel bag and boarded a plane for the first time in my life. I remembered staring out the window as Chicago disappeared beneath the clouds, wondering if my parents were somewhere down there, if they ever planned to come looking for me. Aunt Meredith was waiting at the airport. She stood tall and straight, her silver hair cut in a precise bob, wearing clothes that looked like they cost more than our entire apartment. I expected someone cold and proper. Instead, she hugged me gently and said, "You have had a rough time, Barnaby. No need to pretend otherwise with me." The mansion intimidated me at first. 5 bedrooms, a library, gardens that seemed to go on forever. My bedroom was bigger than our entire apartment had been. I kept waiting for the catch, for her to reveal what chores or obligations would be required in exchange for this charity, but she asked for nothing, except that I attend the private school she enrolled me in and join her for dinner when I could. I kept my walls up for months. I answered her questions politely, but offered nothing more. I expected her to give up on me eventually, just like my parents had. But Aunt Meredith was patient in a way I had never experienced before. She never pushed, never demanded emotional intimacy I was not ready to give. Slowly, carefully, I began to trust her. By my 14th birthday, I had started to believe I might actually stay. By 15, I had begun calling her home my home too, and when I turned 16, she asked if she could legally adopt me. No one had been able to locate my parents, despite multiple attempts. They had simply vanished, leaving no forwarding address, no contact information, nothing to suggest they ever planned to return. With Aunt Meredith, I discovered opportunities I never imagined possible. She noticed my fascination with buildings and design, how I would sketch structures in my notebooks. She arranged for me to shadow a friend of hers who ran an architectural firm. I devoured books on design, structural engineering, architectural history. When it came time for college, I insisted on applying for scholarships despite her offer to pay. We compromised with her covering housing and me handling tuition through a combination of scholarships and part-time work. After college, with her encouragement and a small loan as seed money, I started my own architectural design firm specializing in renovating historic properties. I insisted on repaying her loan with interest, which made her laugh. "You are so much like me," she would say, "too proud for your own good." But she deposited every check understanding my need to stand on my own. For 15 years, there was no word from my parents. Not a call, not a letter, not even a request for information through the lawyers or social services. It was as if Thomas and Diana had disappeared from the face of the earth, or, more accurately, as if they had decided I had disappeared from theirs. My relationship with Aunt Meredith grew deeper with each passing year. We established a Sunday tradition of walking through historic Boston neighborhoods, discussing architectural details, and stopping at small cafes for coffee and pastries. She taught me to appreciate the stories behind buildings, how to read the history of a city through its structures. More importantly, she shared her philosophy on life, on resilience, on creating meaning from hardship. "The people who leave," she told me once, "teach us about ourselves more than the ones who stay." Your father left me too, in his way, choosing your mother and her family over maintaining ties with me. It hurt for years, until I realized his leaving made room in my life for other things, better things. When I was 25, I noticed the first signs of her declining health. Small things at first, short of breath after our Sunday walks. Forgetting details she would have previously recalled with precision, I urged her to see specialists, accompanied her to appointments, and gradually took on the role of caretaker as her condition worsened. The last 2 years of her life, I moved back into the mansion to care for her. I ran my business remotely, scheduled my meetings around her medical appointments, and made sure she still experienced joy despite her limitations. We would sit in the garden she loved, and I would describe new projects, read architecture magazines aloud, or simply sit in comfortable silence, watching birds at the feeder. She insisted on updating her will during this time. "Just to be clear about my wishes," she said. "I never want you to doubt what you meant to me." I brushed it off, uncomfortable discussing her mortality. But she was insistent, meeting with her longtime attorney, Jackson Howard, several times to finalize her estate planning. Despite all the preparations, her death came as a shock. She had been doing better, even joining me for a short walk in the garden. That night, she went to sleep and simply never woke up. Heart complications, the doctors said, quick and painless. Small mercies that did nothing to fill the enormous void her absence created. The grief overwhelmed me at times. My small circle of close friends provided what support they could. Lauren, my best friend, since college, came to stay for a week, forcing me to eat regular meals and step outside occasionally. But nothing could prepare me for the profound loneliness of rattling around in that big house without Aunt Meredith's warm presence. 7 years. That is all the time we had together. 7 years that saved my life, that showed me what family could and should be. 7 years that shaped me more than the 13 preceding them ever had. 3 weeks after the funeral, I received a call from Jackson Howard, requesting that I come to his office for the formal reading of the will. There are some distant cousins making inquiries, he explained. Nothing to worry about, but best to proceed properly with everything documented. I met with Jackson the day before the scheduled reading. His office smelled of leather and old books, a place where important matters had been discussed for generations. He prepared me for what to expect, explaining that there might be relatives I had never met who felt entitled to portions of Meredith's substantial estate. Your aunt was very clear about her wishes, Jackson assured me, but be prepared for some potential challenges. Wealth can make people behave in unfortunate ways. He shuffled some papers, looking uncomfortable. There have also been some inquiries from parties claiming to be your parents. My stomach dropped. After 15 years of silence, the mention of my parents still had the power to unsettle me completely. Jackson must have noticed my reaction, because he quickly added, "Probably nothing. Just people fishing for information after seeing the obituary. But I thought you should know." Lauren offered to accompany me to the will reading for moral support. I declined, feeling this was something I needed to face alone. The night before, I barely slept, dreaming of Meredith, of my parents, of doors opening and closing, of being 13 again and finding that note on the counter. I arrived at the law office 10 minutes early, noting several unfamiliar cars in the parking lot. Inside, Jackson's receptionist led me to a conference room where 5 people were already seated. Jackson made introductions, names that meant nothing to me, attached to faces showing varying degrees of anticipation and discomfort. "Second cousins on your aunt's maternal side," Jackson whispered. "They have not had contact with Meredith in over 20 years. The formal reading began precisely at 10. Jackson's voice took on an official tone as he worked through the legal language. I heard little until he reached the part specifying the distribution of assets. The room fell silent as the full scope of the inheritance became clear. Beyond the Boston property, there was the house in Vermont, significant investments, partial ownership in several businesses, art collections, and liquid assets totaling just over $2 million. Every bit of it left to me. One of the cousins made a small, disappointed sound. Another whispered something to his wife. Jackson continued, reaching for a sealed envelope.